something is happening in Memphis, something is happening in our world. And you know, if I was standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the whole of human history up to now, and the Almighty say to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness, and on towards the Promised Land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would go on by Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus. And I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon. And I would watch them around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal truth of reality. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go on even to the great heyday of the Roman Empire. And I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even go to the day of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of what the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way that the man for whom I'm named had his habitat. I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 Theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the year 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln but finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. But I wouldn't stop there. I would come up even to the early 30s and see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation and come up with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few more years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make, because the world is messed up, the nation is sick, the trouble within the land, and confusion is all around. That's a strange statement to me. But I know somehow, only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that men, in some strange way, are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they assemble today, whether it is in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. The other reason I'm happy to live in this period is that we've been forced to a point where we're going to have to grapple with the problems that people have been trying to grapple with through history. But the demands didn't force them to. Survival demands that we grapple with them. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace. But no longer can they just talk about it. It is no longer the choice between violence, non-violence in this world. It is a choice between non-violence, non-existence. That is where we are today. And also, in the human rights revolution, if something isn't done, and done in a hurry, to bring the colored peoples of the world out of their long years of poverty, out of their long years of hurt and neglect, the whole world is doomed. Now, I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period, to see what is unfolding. And He's allowed me to be here with you in Memphis. Always say to America is be true to what you say on paper. If I live in China, or even Russia, or any other totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges, because they hadn't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for right. So, just as I say, we ain't gonna let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. We ain't gonna let any illegal injunctions turn us around. We're moving on. And as we move on, we need to develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. like the Good Samaritan. I remember several years ago when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car to go down to Jericho. And as soon as we got on that road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as a setting for the parable of the Good Samaritan. It is a winding, meandering road. It's really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is 1,200 miles, or rather 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho, 15 or 20 minutes later, you are 2,200 feet below sea level. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the Bloody Pass. And you know, it's possible that when the priest and the Levite came by and they saw that man lying on the ground, they wondered if the robbers were still there. Or it's possible that when they came by and saw that man lying on the ground, they felt that he was merely faking it. And he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them there for a quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by. He reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? That's the question before you tonight. The question is not, if I stop to help these sanitation workers, what will happen to my job? The question is not, if I stop to help these sanitation workers, what will happen to all the hours that I usually spend in my office every day of every week as a pastor? The question is not, if I stop to help these men in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help these sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That's the question before you tonight. That's the question before you tonight. The other reason I'm happy to be here is that God has allowed me once again to be here with you. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City, autographing the first book that I had written. And as I was sitting down autographing books, a demented black woman came up. And the only thing I heard was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" I was looking down writing. And I said, "Yes." The next minute, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I'd been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. That blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. Once that's punctured, you're drowned in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out the next morning in the New York Times that if I merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened, they allowed me, after the blade had been taken out, they allowed me to move around in a wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in. And from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them, I'll never forget it. I received one from the president and the vice president, but I've forgotten what those telegrams say. But there was one letter. It came from a little girl, a young girl, who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School." And she said, "While it should not matter, I'd like to mention here that I am a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had merely sneezed, you would have died. I am simply writing to say, I am so happy that you didn't sneeze." I want to say tonight that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream and taking the whole nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, would it have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom, ended segregation, interstate travel? If I had sneezed, would it have been around here in 1962, Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up? And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere. Because a man can't ride your back, lest it is bent. If I had sneezed, wouldn't have been around here in 1963 when black people of Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had the chance later that year in August to try to tell America about the dream that I had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama, to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed. Would it have been Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who were suffering? I am so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, now it doesn't matter now. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. And the pilot said over the public address system, "We're sorry for the delay. But we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. And to be sure that all the bags were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong on the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. And we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. And then I got into Memphis. And some began to say the threats. Talk about the threats that were out, about what will happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life, longevity as this place. But I'm not concerned about that now. Just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land. And so, I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Thank you for taking us on our journey. And once again, that concludes our Martin Luther. Thank you for joining us.